Mom, at your age, consider assisted living to simplify things for us.
We only need your money for the event, not your presence in this sophisticated space.
The Carrington Gallery on 125th Street glowed like a jewel box on a Friday night in October. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, you could see Manhattan's elite mingling under Edison bulbs strung like stars across exposed brick walls. I stood outside for a moment before going in. 60 years old, black dress from a thrift store in the Bronx, comfortable shoes. No jewelry except the wedding band I'd worn for 30 years, even though my husband had been gone just as long. My name is Imani Carter. I was born 3 blocks from here in a walk-up with pipes that froze every winter and cockroaches that owned the kitchen after dark. I raised 2 sons in that building, worked nights bartending at a club on Lenox Avenue while they slept at my sister's place. Came home at 4 a.m., smelling like whiskey and cigarette smoke and other people's loneliness. But I had a plan. Every tip, every dollar. I saved it, studied it, learned about property and investment from books I checked out of the Schomburg Center. By the time I was 40, I owned my first building. By 50, I had 6 small places, cultural spaces mostly, studios for artists who couldn't afford Soho, performance venues for poets and musicians who needed stages that didn't require connections or credentials. Carter Holdings, that's what I called it, nothing fancy, just a name on documents most people never saw. Tonight, this gallery, the one hosting 200 of New York's power players, was mine, had been for 3 years. But nobody knew that except my lawyer and my accountant, especially not my sons. I walked through the entrance, past the security guard who nodded politely, without really seeing me, past the coat check where a young woman took my jacket, without asking my name. The main gallery space opened up like a cathedral. 20-foot ceilings, white walls covered in bold, vibrant art from black and brown artists I'd personally selected and funded. Photography, painting, mixed media pieces that told stories of Harlem, of struggle, of beauty that refused to apologize. The crowd was exactly what you'd expect. Tailored suits, designer dresses, champagne and crystal flutes, conversations about summer homes in the Hamptons and which prep school was best for little Madison or Hunter. I moved through them like a ghost. Invisible. Just another older black woman in a simple dress. Help. Maybe. Catering staff. Certainly not someone who belonged in this room as anything other than labor. I spotted my family near the center, a table with the best view. Reserved seating I'd arranged personally, though they didn't know that either. Marcus, my oldest, 35, corporate lawyer at a white shoe firm downtown. He wore a tuxedo that probably cost $3,000 and a watch that cost 10 times that. His wife Vanessa sat beside him, 32, beautiful, MBA from Columbia. She worked in finance and spoke 3 languages and had opinions about wine regions and modern art and everything else that separated people like her from people like me. My younger son Terrence was there too, 32, investment banker, engaged to a woman whose father owned half of the Upper East Side. I approached the table slowly, watching them laugh, watching them belong in a way I never had and never would. Marcus saw me first. His smile faltered. Just for a second, a flicker of embarrassment or discomfort, or whatever emotion you feel when your working-class mother shows up to a high-society event. Mom, you made it. I did. Vanessa turned. Her eyes traveled from my shoes to my dress to my hair, pulled back in a simple bun. Her smile was thin, polite, lethal. Imani. How nice. You look very comfortable. Thank you. Please, sit. She gestured to an empty chair like she was granting permission. Like this was her table, her event, her world. Saturday. A waiter appeared immediately, offering champagne. I took a glass. So, Vanessa said, her voice carrying just enough to reach the neighboring tables. Marcus tells me you're still living in Harlem. In that same building? I am. How quaint. Although I have to say, at your age, have you considered something more manageable? There are wonderful assisted living facilities. Very dignified. We've been researching options. The table went quiet. Marcus shifted in his seat. Terrence studied his phone. Assisted living, I repeated. Well, yes. I mean, you're 60 now. That building of yours, those stairs. What if something happened? We worry about you. We want you to be comfortable. Safe. Safe. The word people use when they mean invisible. When they mean out of the way. That's very thoughtful. We think so. In fact, we found a place in Westchester. Beautiful grounds, activities, people your age. We could help with the costs, of course, as a family. As a family. While she sat at a table I'd paid for, in a gallery I owned, wearing a dress that probably cost more than the rent in the building she wanted me to leave. I sipped my champagne, let the moment breathe. Vanessa, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you know whose wine you're drinking? She blinked. Confused. I'm sorry? The champagne. Do you know who provided it? The gallery, I assume? Why? I smiled. Set down my glass. Signaled to the gallery director, a woman named Patricia who'd worked with me for 2 years. Patricia nodded. Walked to the stage. Spoke into a microphone. Excuse me, everyone. May I have your attention, please? The room quieted. Conversations died. All eyes turned to the stage. I'd like to take a moment to recognize someone very special. The person who made tonight possible. The owner of Carrington Gallery and the visionary behind our mission to support artists of color. A screen behind the stage flickered to life. The Carter Holdings logo appeared, clean. Simple. Powerful. Below it, in letters you couldn't miss. Owner and founder, Imani Carter. The room went silent. Not the polite quiet of people paying attention, the shocked silence of people realizing they'd made a mistake. Patricia continued, Miss Carter has been a champion of Harlem's cultural community for over 20 years. She's invested millions in creating spaces for marginalized artists. And tonight, she's here to celebrate the work of the 32 artists whose pieces grace these walls. Heads turned. People looked around, searching for this mysterious benefactor. I stood. Slowly. All eyes found me. This older black woman in a thrift store dress at a table near the center. I walked to the stage. Climbed the steps. Took the microphone from Patricia. Thank you all for coming, I said. My voice steady. Clear. Unapologetic. I'm Imani Carter. I was born 3 blocks from here. Raised my sons in a walk-up with no heat and rats in the walls. Worked nights as a bartender to keep us fed. You could hear phones being pulled out. Cameras starting to record. Some of you know Harlem as a place to invest, to gentrify, to buy low and sell high. But for me, Harlem is home. It's culture, it's history. It's people who've been told they don't belong but built something beautiful anyway. I paused, looked directly at my table. At Vanessa, whose face had gone pale. At Marcus, who couldn't meet my eyes. This gallery exists because I believe in supporting our own, in creating spaces where black and brown artists don't need permission or connections, just talent, just vision, just the courage to create. I set the microphone down. The room erupted. Applause. Questions shouted from reporters. Cameras flashing. But I wasn't done. I walked back to my table. Stood behind my chair. Looked at Vanessa. You asked about assisted living, about safety, about what's dignified for someone my age. She opened her mouth. No words came out. Let me be clear. I don't need your help. I don't need your pity. And I certainly don't need you deciding what's appropriate for me. I picked up the champagne bottle from the ice bucket, showed her the label. This wine? I paid for it. This gallery? I own it. That dress you're wearing? Probably cost more than I've spent on myself in 5 years. But you know what I bought instead? Buildings. Business. Legacy. Marcus finally spoke. Mom, please? No, baby. Not tonight. Tonight, I'm done being the embarrassment. The simple mother you hide from your friends. The working class woman you suggest should go quietly into some facility where you don't have to explain me. I set down the bottle. Straightened my dress. I want you to understand something. I built this. Not with a trust fund or connections or a fancy degree. With my hands, my mind, my refusal to be small just because people like you need me to be. Vanessa found her voice. This is inappropriate. You're making a scene. Good. Let them see. Let everyone in this room understand that the woman you dismissed, the mother you wanted to hide away, she owns the ground you're standing on. I turned to the room, spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. I want to thank Harlem for teaching me that roots matter, that culture matters, that we don't need permission to take up space. I looked back at my sons, both of them frozen, humiliated, realizing too late what they'd done. And I want to remind my family that sophistication isn't about clothes or accents or knowing which fork to use. It's about respect, dignity, remembering where you came from and honoring the people who got you there. I walked off the stage. Through the crowd, past the whispers and the stares and the cameras still flashing. Out the door into the Harlem night. The streets I'd walked 1,000 times. The neighborhood that raised me and never once asked me to be anything other than myself. Behind me, I could hear the chaos, the questions, the realization rippling through that room that they'd all witnessed something they'd be talking about for years. But I didn't look back, didn't need to. I'd spent 30 years being small, being grateful, being the mother who didn't rock the boat because she was afraid of losing her sons. Tonight I'd chosen myself, my dignity, my truth, and if they couldn't handle that, if they needed me to be simple and manageable and out of the way, then they'd just learned a very expensive lesson about what happens when you underestimate a Harlem woman with nothing left to prove. The morning after the gala, I woke at 5:30 like I had every day for 40 years. Made coffee in the same kitchen where I'd raised my boys. Sat at the same table where they'd done homework while I balanced checkbooks and dreamed bigger than anyone thought possible. My phone started buzzing at 6. Texts, emails, voicemails piling up so fast the screen couldn't keep up. I ignored them, drank my coffee, watched the sun come up over Harlem through windows that had seen everything. Poverty, grief, triumph, loss. At 7, I finally checked my phone. The first thing I saw was an article from the Harlem Cultural Review. Wealth in Silence, the woman behind Harlem's galleries. They'd moved fast. Published overnight. The story had everything. My background, my properties, the empire I'd built while everyone assumed I was just another struggling widow from the projects. And of course, they'd included what happened at the gala. Vanessa's comments. My revelation. The moment I'd stopped being invisible and forced everyone to see exactly who I was. By noon, the story had gone viral. Picked up by the Times, the Amsterdam News. Even some national outlets interested in the angle of hidden black wealth and generational shame. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Miss Carter? This is Janet Wu from the Metropolitan Cultural Alliance. I'm calling regarding Vanessa Coleman's position on our board. I'm listening. Given last night's events and the subsequent media coverage, we feel it's best if Mrs. Coleman steps down. Her conduct reflected poorly on our commitment to inclusion and respect for diverse backgrounds. I see. We wanted you to know before making a public announcement. And we'd like to extend an invitation for you to join our board. Your work in Harlem is exactly what we should be supporting. I thanked her. Declined the invitation. Hung up. Vanessa had lost her seat. The position she'd held up like a trophy. The thing that made her feel sophisticated and important and better than people like me. Gone. My phone rang again. Marcus's firm this time. A senior partner I'd met once at a company dinner years ago. Miss Carter, I'm calling about your son. What about him? We're placing him on administrative leave. Pending a review, the optics of last night, the family situation, it's created concerns about judgment and ethics. Ethics. Yes. We hold our attorneys to high standards. Personal conduct matters. We can't have someone representing our firm who treats family members the way those videos show. Someone had recorded it. Of course they had. Multiple angles. Marcus sitting silent while his wife suggested I go to assisted living. His face when I revealed I owned the gallery. The whole thing was probably all over social media by now. How long is the leave? Indefinite. We'll reassess in 30 days. After he hung up, I sat with my cold coffee and felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, not joy, just a quiet, heavy certainty that actions have consequences. That you can't spend years treating someone as less than and expect no price. Around 3 p.m., Marcus showed up at my office. Carter Holdings occupied the second floor of a brownstone on Frederick Douglass Boulevard. Nothing fancy. Just desks and filing cabinets and walls covered with photos of the buildings I owned, the artists I'd supported, the community I'd served. He didn't knock. Just walked in looking like he hadn't slept. His tie was loose. Hair uncombed. The polish gone. Mom, we need to talk. About what? About last night. About what you did. I leaned back in my chair. Studied my oldest son. The boy I'd carried on my hip while bartending, the kid I'd worked 3 jobs to send to private school. What I did? You embarrassed us. In front of everyone. Made us look like villains when we were just trying to help. Help. Yes. With the assisted living suggestion. With trying to make sure you're taken care of. Taken care of or out of the way. He faltered. That's not fair. Fair? You sat there while your wife called me simple, while she suggested I wasn't sophisticated enough for that room, for your life, and you said nothing. I didn't know what to say. How about defending me? How about telling her I'm your mother and she will speak to me with respect? It wasn't that simple. It was exactly that simple, Marcus. You had a choice. Your wife or your mother. Status or loyalty. And you chose. He sat down heavily in the chair across from me. Put his head in his hands. The firm suspended me. Did you know that? I heard. Vanessa lost her board seat. We're getting calls from reporters. People we know are avoiding us. And this is your fault. You didn't have to make it so public, so dramatic. I stood. Walked to the window overlooking 125th Street. The street where I'd walked 1,000,000 times. Where I'd built everything these boys had benefited from. Let me tell you what's dramatic, baby. Dramatic is working until 4 a.m. and coming home to sleep 2 hours before getting your breakfast ready for school. Dramatic is choosing between paying rent and buying you new shoes. Dramatic is building a business empire with my bare hands while you learn to be ashamed of where you came from. I'm not ashamed. You are. You have been for years. Ever since you got that scholarship to Dalton and started meeting kids whose parents had summer houses and legacy admissions to Yale, you learned to be embarrassed by me. By Harlem. By everything that made you who you are. That's not true. Then tell me. When's the last time you brought colleagues to my house? When's the last time you mentioned I owned property? When's the last time you introduced me as anything other than Mom, in a way that minimized what that means? Silence. That's what I thought. I sat back down. Opened my laptop. Started typing while he watched. What are you doing? Sending instructions to my accountant. The trust fund I set up for you? Gone. The down payment I gave you for that penthouse in Tribeca? I'm calling the loan. The car I co-signed for Vanessa when you were dating? Repossessed. His face went white. You can't do that. I can. I have. It's already done. Mom, we'll lose the apartment, Vanessa's car, everything. Good. Then you'll understand what I started with. Nothing, just determination and a refusal to be small. This is cruel. No, baby. Cruel is spending 30 years being dismissed by your own children. This is consequences. He stood, paced, ran his hands through his hair. What do you want from us? I want you to learn. To understand. To remember that before you were corporate lawyers and board members and people who belonged at galas, you were boys in Harlem who ate cereal for dinner because that's all I could afford. How are we supposed to learn that by losing everything? The same way I learned to build everything, by working, by struggling, by doing it yourself instead of standing on someone else's foundation. I pulled out a folder, set it on the desk between us. You owe me $1.5 million. That's the apartment down payment, the trust fund, the cars, the money I've given you over the years because I loved you more than I loved financial security. I don't have that kind of money. I know. So you're going to work it off. Work it off how? Community maintenance. The buildings I own need upkeep. You'll do it. Painting. Repairs. Cleaning. The work you've spent your whole adult life being too good for. You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? His jaw tightened. And if I refuse? Then you pay the debt in cash within 30 days or I sue. And that suspension from your firm becomes permanent because no white shoe law firm wants an attorney with financial judgments against them. You'd really do that? To your own son? In a heartbeat. Because you need to learn that privilege isn't birthright, it's earned. And you stopped earning mine the minute you let your wife suggest I needed assisted living. He left without another word, door slamming, footsteps heavy on the stairs. I sat in the silence. Finished my now cold coffee. Felt something settle in my chest. Not anger. Not even hurt anymore. Just clarity. I'd spent 3 decades making myself small so my sons could feel big. Hiding my success so they could discover their own. Supporting them silently while they learned to be ashamed of the support. No more. They wanted sophisticated? I'd show them what sophistication really meant. Not manners or accents or knowing which wine to order, but the ability to build something from nothing. To demand respect without apology. To stand in your truth even when it costs you everything comfortable. By evening, Harlem was talking. Some people called me cruel. Said I was punishing my boys for being successful, for wanting better lives. Others understood, saw it for what it was. A mother teaching her sons the lesson they'd refused to learn any other way. That loyalty matters. That roots matter. That you can't build a life on someone else's sacrifice and then act like that sacrifice was somehow beneath you. I didn't care what people said, didn't need their approval or their understanding. I just remembered those nights. Coming home from the bar at 4 a.m., smelling like cigarettes and cheap whiskey. Counting tips on the kitchen table while my boys slept. Telling myself that one day, if I ever had power, I'd use it wisely. I'd teach them what really mattered. And today? Today I kept that promise. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with the kind of discipline that only comes from loving someone enough to let them fall so they can learn to stand on their own. Harlem made me strong. Now it was time for Harlem to teach my sons the same lesson. Whether they liked it or not. I called a meeting for Monday morning at 9. My office. All 3 of them. Marcus, Vanessa, and my younger son Terrence, who'd been noticeably silent through everything but equally complicit. They showed up 15 minutes early. Sat in my waiting area like students outside the principal's office. Nervous. Uncertain. The confidence stripped away. I let them wait. Not out of cruelty. But because waiting builds awareness. Makes you sit with your choices. At 9 exactly, I opened my door. Come in. They filed in. No designer clothes this time. Marcus wore jeans and a polo shirt. Vanessa in slacks and a simple blouse. Terrence in khakis and a button-down. Regular people clothes. The kind I'd worn my whole life while they climbed social ladders. Saturday I stayed standing, looked at each of them. You owe me $1.5 million, combined debts. Money I gave freely because you were my sons, and I believed in supporting family. Marcus opened his mouth. I raised my hand. I'm not finished. That debt is real. Legally documented. You can pay it in cash within 30 days, or we go to court. Your choice. Mom, Terrence started, we don't have that kind of liquid. I know. Which is why I'm offering an alternative. You work it off. All of you. Vanessa's voice was small. Work it off how? I pulled out 3 folders. Set them on the desk. Each one labeled with a name. Marcus. You'll work maintenance at the Carter Community Center on 128th Street. 40 hours a week. Repairs, cleaning, whatever needs doing. $8 an hour. His face went pale. $8? That's barely minimum. That's what I paid you when you were 16 and helped me paint apartments. Seemed fair then, should seem fair now. I turned to Vanessa. You'll work at the Harlem Community Kitchen. 4 days a week. Prep, serving, cleaning, helping feed the people you've spent years looking down on. Her hands trembled in her lap. I don't know how to cook for that many people. Then you'll learn. Just like I learned to bartend. Just like I learned real estate. Just like I learned everything I needed to survive. Finally, Terrence, you'll be a tour guide at the Carrington Gallery. Weekends. Teaching school groups and community members about the artists we support, the history of Harlem, the culture you've been so eager to distance yourself from. For how long? Until the debt is paid. At current wages, approximately 2 years. Silence filled the room like smoke. Heavy. Suffocating. Marcus found his voice first. 2 years? Mom, that's insane. We have careers. Responsibilities. Had careers. Marcus, you're suspended. Vanessa, you have no board position. Terrence, your firm will survive without you for a while, or won't. Either way, you'll learn something valuable. This is punishment. No, baby. Punishment would be taking you to court and destroying your credit for a decade. This is education. The kind you should have gotten years ago. Vanessa wiped her eyes. What if we refuse? Then you pay in cash or I file suit by Friday. The choice has always been yours. They left with their folders. Didn't speak. Didn't argue. Just took the papers and walked out like people who'd finally run out of options. The first week was exactly what I expected. Marcus showed up late to the community center. Complained about the work. Did half jobs that the center director, a woman named Lorraine who'd worked with me for a decade, made him redo. Vanessa cried in the kitchen. Burned food. Cut herself chopping vegetables. Looked at the women working beside her like they were from another planet. Terrence stood in the gallery looking bored. Gave tours in a monotone voice that made middle schoolers check their phones. I watched from a distance. Got reports from Lorraine and Gloria, who ran the kitchen, and Patricia at the gallery. They're struggling, Lorraine told me over coffee. But they're showing up, that's something. Give them time. You really think this will work? Teaching grown adults humility? It has to, because if it doesn't, I've lost my sons forever, and I'm not ready to accept that. Week 2 was worse. Marcus got into an argument with an elderly tenant about a repair job. Vanessa broke down completely when a homeless man yelled at her for serving him cold soup. Terrence just went through the motions. Empty. Resentful. Waiting for it to be over. But week 3. Something shifted. I stopped by the community center late one afternoon. Unannounced. Just walked in to see how things were running. Found Marcus in the basement with Mr. Washington, a 78-year-old retired plumber who volunteered his time helping with repairs. They were fixing a water heater. Marcus was on his back under the tank, Mr. Washington kneeling beside him giving instructions. No, not that wrench. The other one. Yeah. Now tighten it steady. Don't force it. Marcus followed the directions. Patient. Focused. Not the impatient corporate lawyer who wanted everything done yesterday. Good, Mr. Washington said. You're learning. Hands remember what the head forgets. Marcus slid out from under the heater, saw me standing there, didn't look away this time, just nodded. Hey, Mom. How's it going? It's going. Mr. Washington's teaching me things Dad probably would have if he'd lived long enough. Something cracked in my chest. My late husband, dead at 32, never got to teach his sons how to fix things or build things or use their hands. Your father would be proud, Mr. Washington said. Good man, your daddy, used to help me with odd jobs around the neighborhood. Marcus looked at him. You knew my father? Everyone knew James Carter. Worked construction. Always helped people fix things for free. Where you think your mama learned to take care of buildings? I left them there. Marcus asking questions about his father. Mr. Washington sharing stories I'd never told my sons because it hurt too much to remember. At the kitchen, I found Vanessa in the back room. She was making sandwiches, turkey and cheese. Simple, but her hands moved with purpose now, efficiency. Gloria stood beside her, teaching her how to cut diagonally, how to wrap them so they stayed fresh. You're getting better, Gloria said. First week you couldn't crack an egg, now look at you. Vanessa smiled. Small. Genuine. I never had to learn. My mother had a cook. Then restaurants. Then Marcus made enough that we just ordered in. Nothing wrong with that. But there's something about feeding people with your own hands, makes food taste different. An older woman walked in. 90 if she was a day. Walked with a cane, moved slow. Miss Evelyn, Gloria said. You're regular? You know it, baby. Vanessa handed her a sandwich and a cup of soup. The old woman took them, started to turn away. Wait, Vanessa said. Can I ask you something? Sure, baby. Why do you come here? I mean, not to be rude, but you seem like you could afford groceries. Miss Evelyn smiled. I can, got a pension, Social Security, but I come here because this place remembers I exist, because Gloria knows my name, and you just learned how to make my sandwich the way I like it. That matters more than money, child. Being seen, being remembered, being human. She shuffled away. Vanessa stood there, staring after her. I slipped out before she could see me. At the gallery, I found Terrence leading a tour. 6th graders from a school in the Bronx. Restless. Chatty. Not interested in art. But Terrence was trying. Actually trying. This painting here, he was saying, is by an artist named Kwame Johnson. He grew up in Harlem in the 60s. This piece shows the Apollo Theater. See the way he used light? That's hope. In the middle of everything that was hard, he painted light. One of the kids raised her hand. Did you know him? No. But my grandmother did. She told me stories about the Apollo, about seeing James Brown and Ella Fitzgerald, about how music kept Harlem alive when everything else was trying to kill it. The kids were listening now. Actually engaged. Art isn't just pretty pictures, Terrence continued. It's proof. Proof we were here. Proof we mattered. Proof we created beauty even when the world said we didn't deserve to. I stood in the back of the gallery watching my youngest son teach these kids something I'd been trying to teach him his whole life. That our history mattered. That our culture was something to be proud of, not embarrassed by. That Harlem wasn't a starting point to escape from. It was a foundation to build on. After the tour, I walked up to him. That was good. He turned. Looked tired. But something in his eyes had changed. Thanks. You meant it. What you said about art being proof. Yeah. I did. I've been reading the artist's statements. The histories. I didn't know any of this, Mom. About Harlem, about what you've been doing, who you've been helping. You never asked. I know. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for a lot of things. We stood there in the gallery surrounded by the art I'd funded, the culture I'd preserved, the legacy I'd built while they were learning to be ashamed of it. "Keep going," I said. "You're not done yet. But you're closer than you were." 3 months in, they'd all changed. Not completely. Not perfectly. But enough that I could see the men they were becoming. The people they might have been if privilege hadn't gotten in the way. And I started to believe. Just a little. That maybe we could find our way back to each other. Not to what we were. But to something better. Something earned instead of assumed. Something real. Month 4 brought something I hadn't expected. Hope. Marcus came to my office on a Tuesday morning. Knocked this time. Waited for permission before entering. "Mom. Got a minute?" "Always." He sat down. Set a folder on my desk. It was worn, dog-eared, filled with papers covered in his handwriting. "What's this?" "A proposal. For the community center. Improvements I think we should make." I opened it. 30 pages. Detailed plans for expanding the after-school program, adding a computer lab, partnering with local schools to provide tutoring, budget projections, funding sources, partnership possibilities, the kind of thorough planning he used to do for corporate clients but had never thought to apply to his own community. "This is good work. Thanks. I've been talking to people, the families who use the center, the kids. They need more. And we can provide it if we're smart about resources. And you want my approval? I want your feedback. And maybe funding. But I'll understand if you say no. I know I haven't earned." "Stop." I closed the folder, looked at my son. "You're doing the work. Asking the right questions. Caring about the right things. That's earning it." His eyes got wet. He blinked it away. "I'm sorry, Mom. For everything. For being ashamed. For letting Vanessa talk to you that way. For forgetting what you sacrificed. I know. Do you forgive me? Ask me again in a year. When this isn't new anymore. When the novelty wears off and you're still showing up anyway." He nodded. Understood. Left with his folder and a promise to keep working. 2 weeks later, Vanessa did something that surprised everyone, including herself. The Harlem Community Kitchen held an annual cooking competition. Local chefs. Food trucks. Anyone who wanted to submit dishes that used affordable ingredients to create nutritious meals for people experiencing food insecurity. Vanessa entered, didn't tell anyone, just showed up with her submission. 3 judges, all from the community. People who'd been homeless, people who relied on food assistance, people who knew the difference between food that nourished and food that just filled space. She made a bean soup. Simple. The kind I'd taught her mother-in-law to make 30 years ago. White beans, ham hock, vegetables, cornbread on the side. Nothing fancy, nothing sophisticated, just honest food made with care. She won. Gloria called me that night. "You need to see this." "See what?" "Just come to the kitchen, tomorrow, noon." I went. Found the place packed. News crews. Community members. People I'd known for decades. And there was Vanessa. Holding a plaque. Looking stunned. The MC was speaking. "This year's Harlem Community Kitchen Excellence Award goes to Vanessa Coleman for her white bean soup. The judges said it reminded them of home. Of being loved. Of meals that feed more than just the body." Vanessa saw me. Tears streaming down her face, mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." I nodded. Didn't stay for the reception, just left her there in her moment. The one she'd earned without my name or my money or anything except her own hands and her willingness to learn. Terrence's transformation took longer. He was stubborn, resentful, went through the motions for months without really engaging. But slowly, something changed. He started doing research, real research. About the artists in the gallery, about Harlem history, about the Renaissance and the music and the writers who'd made this neighborhood legendary. He started writing his own tours. Not just reciting facts, but telling stories, making connections. One Saturday, I sat in on a tour he was giving. College students from Columbia. Art history majors who thought they knew everything about Black culture from textbooks. Terrence stood in front of a photograph by Gordon Parks. This was taken in 1963. Right here in Harlem. See the little girl in the window? Her name was Maya. My grandmother knew her family. He paused. Let that land. We talk about Harlem like it's history. Like it's something that happened and ended. But the people in these photographs? Their children still live here. Their grandchildren. Their great-grandchildren. This isn't the past. It's a living, breathing community that's been fighting for dignity for 100 years. One of the students raised their hand. Are you from Harlem? My mother is. I grew up trying to forget that. Trying to be something else. Something I thought was better. He looked right at me. I was wrong. Nothing is better than remembering where you come from, than honoring the people who built the ground you stand on. After the tour, he organized something new. Women Who Built Harlem. A walking tour of buildings owned and operated by Black women. Including mine. He never mentioned my name. Never made it about me. Just told the stories of women who'd been bartenders and housekeepers and janitors who'd saved and invested and built something permanent. I followed the tour from a distance. Listened to him talk about resilience and vision and the quiet power of women who refused to disappear. And I cried. Right there on 125th Street. Proud. A year after the gala, after everything fell apart and started rebuilding, Terrence got engaged. Her name was Simone. She worked at the gallery. Volunteer coordinator. Harlem born and raised. The kind of woman who knew every bodega owner by name and could trace her family back 5 generations in this neighborhood. They wanted to get married at the gallery. Small ceremony. Family and close friends. Will you help plan it? Terrence asked. What do you need? Just you, Mom. That's all. Just you being there and blessing it. The engagement party was on a Sunday afternoon. September. Light streaming through the tall windows of the gallery. 60 people. Jazz trio in the corner. Food from local restaurants I'd supported for years. Vanessa made the soup. Her award-winning white bean recipe, served it herself with cornbread and greens. Marcus organized the space. Made sure everyone had seats. Handled logistics with the efficiency of someone who'd learned that service wasn't beneath him. Terrence and Simone stood together looking happy. Real happy. The kind that comes from building something together, instead of just benefiting from what someone else built. Near the end of the party, I stood up. Tapped my glass. I want to say something. The room quieted. All eyes on me. A year ago, I stood in this gallery and told some hard truths. About respect. About dignity. About what it means to honor where you come from. I looked at my sons. At Vanessa. At the lives they'd built over the past 12 months. I'm proud of what you've become. Not because you're working for me, but because you're working for yourselves. For this community. For something bigger than status or money or what other people think. I pulled out 3 envelopes. Walked to where they stood together. Marcus, you've spent a year managing the community center. Learning, growing, actually caring about the people you serve. I handed him an envelope. Inside is authorization to become the official director. The job is yours. With salary. Benefits. Everything that comes with real responsibility. He opened it. Read. Looked up at me with tears in his eyes. Thank you. Earn it every day. That's how legacy works. I turned to Vanessa. You've transformed from someone who thought cooking for the community was beneath her to someone who won an award for feeding people with dignity. I handed her an envelope. 10% ownership of this gallery. And a seat on the board of the Carter Foundation. Use it to help other women who need someone to believe in them. She couldn't speak, just hugged me, held on like she was afraid I'd disappear. Finally, Terrence. You've become what I always hoped you'd be. A man who understands that education isn't just about degrees, it's about connection. About teaching people their own worth. I gave him the last envelope. You're now the director of Legacy Lights, a new cultural preservation project I'm starting. To document and celebrate Harlem's history through the voices of people who live it. Mom, I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep showing up. Keep learning. Keep honoring this community that made us all who we are. The room erupted. Applause. Congratulations. People crying and laughing and celebrating. But I didn't stay for all of it. Slipped out quietly. Let them have their moment. Walked the streets of Harlem as the sun set, past the Apollo, past the Schomburg, past the church where I'd married my husband 40 years ago. Past all the places that held my history, my pain, my triumph. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Complete. Not because my sons had come back to me, but because they'd found themselves, found their purpose, found a way to be proud of where they came from instead of ashamed. That night, I sat in my apartment. The same one I'd lived in for 30 years. The one they'd wanted me to leave for assisted living. Made tea. Sat by the window watching Harlem breathe below me. My phone buzzed. Group text from all three of them. Family dinner next Sunday? Our treat. Vanessa's cooking. I smiled, typed back. I'll be there. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. Not with reservation or hurt, or the weight of disappointment. Just love. Pure. Simple. Earned. They'd come home, not to the people they were, but to the people they were meant to be all along. And that was worth every hard lesson, every consequence, every moment I'd chosen truth over comfort. Because legacy isn't what you leave behind when you die. It's what you build in the people who survive you. And my sons? They were finally building something worth inheriting. 5 years after the gala that changed everything, I sat in the corner of what used to be Carrington Gallery. It had a new name now. Second Canvas Studio. The rebrand had been Terrence's idea. A fresh start. A space that explicitly welcomed artists who'd been told they weren't good enough, weren't marketable enough, weren't the right fit for traditional galleries. Second chances. Second looks. Second canvas. The walls were covered with work from artists nobody else would show, a formerly incarcerated painter, a grandmother who didn't start making art until she was 70, a teenager from the projects with a vision that made your chest ache. Every first Friday, we held openings. Free to the public. Music, food, community. I didn't run it anymore. Terrence and Simone did. I just came, sat in my corner, watched, took notes. I was writing a book. Had been for 3 years. Canvas of grit. Part memoir, part manifesto, part love letter to Harlem and everyone who'd ever been told they were too much or not enough, or somehow always wrong. I wrote about the lonely years, the bartending shifts that lasted until dawn, the men who propositioned me, and the bosses who underpaid me, and the moments I cried in storage rooms because I was so tired I couldn't remember why I was fighting. I wrote about my husband, James, dead at 32. How his death nearly broke me, how I'd decided to turn grief into fuel instead of letting it become my ending. I wrote about raising boys alone, the mistakes I made, the times I was too hard, too soft, too proud to ask for help even when I was drowning. And I wrote about that night. The gala. The moment I stopped being invisible and started demanding respect. But mostly, I wrote about what came after, the slow, painful rebuilding. The lessons learned through consequence. The forgiveness that came not from forgetting but from growing. It was almost done. Just a few more chapters. A conclusion. I wasn't quite ready to write because I didn't know yet how the story ended. Tonight was family dinner. Last Sunday of every month. Tradition we'd started 2 years ago. Everyone showed up. Marcus and his wife, who wasn't Vanessa anymore. They'd divorced, amicably. She'd moved to Boston for a job, he'd stayed in Harlem, found someone new. A teacher named Angela who worked at the school connected to his community center. Vanessa came anyway. Part of the family now, regardless of marriage status, she ran a cooking program at the center, free classes for unemployed women, teaching them skills that could turn into careers or just feed their families with dignity. Terrence and Simone, married 3 years, talking about kids, running Legacy Lights together, documenting Harlem's oral history, connecting seniors with youth, making sure stories didn't die with the people who lived them. And my grandchildren, Marcus had 2, Terrence had 1 on the way, kids who knew their grandmother wasn't fancy but was fierce, who understood that Harlem wasn't a place to escape but a foundation to build on. We gathered in the main gallery space after hours, pushed tables together, set out mismatched chairs, made it feel like home instead of an institution. Vanessa brought the soup, her famous white bean recipe, the one that had won awards, the one that tasted like forgiveness and second chances and everything we'd all learned the hard way. Marcus brought cornbread. Angela made greens. Simone contributed a salad. Terrence brought wine from a black-owned vineyard upstate. I brought myself. That's all they wanted. All they needed. We ate. Talked. Laughed. The kids ran around the gallery looking at art and asking questions that made the adults think harder than we wanted to. Grandma, why did this lady paint trash cans? Because trash cans are part of the neighborhood, baby. And neighborhood means everything deserves to be seen. Even the things people usually ignore. After dinner, after the kids were playing in the corner and the adults were nursing second glasses of wine, Marcus cleared his throat. I want to say something. We quieted. Waited. 5 years ago, I was suspended from my job. Lost everything I thought mattered. My reputation, my status, my sense of who I was. He looked at me. His eyes clear. Honest. I was angry at you, Mom. Thought you'd destroyed my life. Humiliated me on purpose. I know. But you saved me. You taught me that the life I was living wasn't real, it was borrowed. Built on your foundation without acknowledging the foundation existed. Angela squeezed his hand. He continued. Now I run a community center. Make a quarter of what I used to. Live in an apartment that's a fraction of the size. And I'm happier than I've ever been. Because I'm doing work that matters. Helping kids who remind me of who I could have been if I'd stayed connected to where I came from. Vanessa spoke next. I was terrible to you. Cruel. I looked at you and saw everything I'd been taught to look down on. Working class. Simple. Not sophisticated enough for my world. She wiped her eyes. You could have destroyed me, could have made sure I never worked again, never recovered. Instead, you put me in a kitchen and let me learn. Let me discover that feeding people is the most sophisticated thing I've ever done. Terrence was last. I spent 30 years trying to be anything except a kid from Harlem. Went to the right schools. Said the right things. Dated the right people. All to prove I wasn't like you. He laughed. Bitter. Self-aware. Turns out being like you is the best thing I could aspire to. You built an empire with nothing. You supported a community. You never apologized for taking up space. That's what I'm trying to teach now. Through Legacy Lights, through the tours, through everything. I listened, didn't interrupt. Let them say what they needed to say. When they finished, I stood. Walked to the window. Looked out at Harlem on a Sunday night. The streets still busy. Music spilling from open windows. People living loud because silence felt too much like disappearing. You know what I learned? I said, still looking out. What, Mom? That I was so focused on being strong. I forgot to be soft. So determined to teach you lessons. I forgot to just love you. So committed to making you respect me. I forgot you needed to know I respected you. I turned back to face them. I was never cold. I was just protecting myself. building walls because I'd been hurt too many times by people not valuing what I built. But walls don't just keep people out. They keep you in. Alone. Safe, but isolated. "You're not alone now," Marcus said. "No. I'm not. Because you all grew up. Because you learned. Because we all got a second chance we almost didn't deserve." Simone raised her glass. "To second chances. We all raised ours." Clinked. Drank. "And to second canvases," Terrence added, gesturing at the gallery around us, "to the places and people who let us start over. Paint something new. Create something better." The kids ran over. Wanted attention. Wanted stories. Wanted Grandma to teach them the hand games she'd taught their parents 30 years ago. I sat on the floor, creaky knees and all. Showed them patterns and rhythms passed down from my mother and her mother before her. Songs from the South that made it to Harlem during the migration. Pieces of history living in children's hands. After everyone left, after the hugs and the promises to see each other next month, I stayed behind, cleaned up, put chairs back, turned off most of the lights, sat at my corner desk, opened my laptop, looked at the last chapter of Canvas of Grit, typed the final lines. We build walls to protect ourselves. Then we learn to paint on them. Turn barriers into beauty. Defense into art. Pain into purpose. That's what life taught me. That's what Harlem taught me. That the things meant to contain us can become the canvas where we create our greatest work. I paused, thought about adding more, decided against it. Sometimes stories end not with grand proclamations but with simple truth. I'd been a bartender, a widow, a mother, a businesswoman, a woman dismissed and underestimated and told to disappear into assisted living, and I'd turned all of it into legacy, not through anger, through persistence, through refusing to be small, through teaching my sons that respect isn't given, it's demanded and earned and maintained. I saved the document, closed my laptop, sat in the dim gallery surrounded by art from people who'd been given second chances, just like my family, just like me. Outside, Harlem glowed. Sunday night turning into Monday morning. The city that never sleeps because sleep feels too much like giving up. I stood at the window, 65 now. Gray hair, arthritic knees, reading glasses. All the markers of age that Vanessa had used to suggest I needed managing. But I'd never felt more powerful, more clear, more certain of my place in this world. Because power isn't about money or status or convincing people you're sophisticated. It's about building something that lasts, teaching something that matters, loving people enough to let them fail and learn and grow into who they're meant to be. Harlem had taught me that. 30 years of walking these streets, raising these boys, building these spaces, creating beauty in the margins nobody else thought to look. And now? Now my sons were teaching it to the next generation. Passing down not just property or money, but values, purpose, pride in where you come from and who raised you. That was the legacy. Not buildings or bank accounts, but people who understood that dignity wasn't negotiable. That community mattered. That you could be successful and sophisticated without ever forgetting the sidewalks that taught you how to walk. I locked up the gallery, walked home through Harlem streets at midnight, past the bodega that had been there 40 years, past the church where I'd buried my husband, past the building where I'd raised my boys in 400 square feet of space and infinite determination. Made it home. Made tea. Sat by my window like I'd done 10,000 times before. And I smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was real. My family had come back to me, not out of obligation, but out of understanding, out of respect earned through consequence and time and the slow, hard work of becoming better. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. If this story moved you, if you've ever been dismissed by the people who should have valued you most, or if you believe in the power of demanding respect while still choosing love, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories about everyday people who refuse to be small, Because the truth is simple. Legacy isn't what you leave behind when you die. It's what you build in the people who survive you, and that's something no amount of money or status can buy.